Imagine yourself walking down a familiar road in the middle of the afternoon, sunlight cutting through the branches of the trees. Suddenly, a strange thought flashes. What if time does not really flow the way I feel it does? What if every moment, past, present, and future, already exists, and it is only my awareness sliding across each slice? That question feels like someone has suddenly flipped a light switch, and the entire familiar scene has turned into a frozen painting. Time, in your everyday experience, feels like a flowing river. Morning follows noon, then afternoon, evening, and night. You grow older year by year, leaves fall, strands of hair turn silver. Everything is tied to the sense of passing. But a paradox appears when you pause and ask, do you actually see time flowing, or do you only see a chain of separate moments, which your brain stitches together into the story of a flow? Think of a simple example. When you watch a movie, you see characters move, run, laugh, cry. Everything is continuous and alive. But in truth, a film is nothing but a sequence of still frames projected at a speed of about 24 frames per second. Your brain does not see each photo separately. It creates the illusion of movement. Is it any different in life when your brain is creating the illusion of time from discrete moments? Philosophy calls this the paradox of the block universe. In modern physics, there is the idea that past, present, and future all coexist as fixed points on a four-dimensional map. They do not flow. Only your awareness moves, like a finger sliding across a page. This raises a shocking question. If every moment already exists, then is the freedom you feel real? Or are you only reading a novel whose lines were written long before? Remember a time you stood waiting at a red light. Each second stretched out endlessly. But then, when talking with a close friend for hours, time rushed by so quickly it felt like only minutes had passed. The same clock measured it, yet the experience was entirely different. So what is the real time the numbers on the clock face, or the elasticity inside your mind? If the clock is right, why does your memory tell you otherwise? If memory is right, then is the clock only a convenient illusion? Go further and look at dreams. In a short dream of just a few minutes, you can live through an entire day, even an entire lifetime. Waking up, you are stunned. Dream time does not follow the rhythm of the clock. It stretches like a rubber band, depending on the structure of the dream. So who can guarantee that the time you are experiencing right now is not also being stretched by some larger dream? You see, the paradox of time is one of the brain's most delicate traps. Every memory you have is a trace of what has passed, yet memory itself is reconstructed each time you recall it. You cannot hold the past. You only carry a copy in your head. You cannot hold the future either. You only have expectations. The only thing you truly have is the present moment. And the paradox is that the instant you recognize it, it has already become the past. So what is time? Is it truly a flowing river, or only an illusion the mind builds to arrange experience? If all past and future moments already coexist, and you are merely sliding through predetermined frames, then does freedom of choice still remain? And if time is only illusion, perhaps you can breathe easier, because every loss is only a single frame in an endless sequence, never truly gone. In the silent darkness, you may close your eyes and hear the ticking of a clock. Each tick presses a question into your heart. Is time flowing, or are you simply sliding through a film? The question does not need an answer, because the question itself is the doorway to deeper reflection. Picture another moment. You are on a long train ride, looking out the window. The scenery moves away hills, power lines, small rooftops. The sensation of time flowing is vivid. But if someone took a picture every second, you would see only frozen frames. It is the linking in your mind that convinces you of a river. And here, the paradox opens. Perhaps nothing flows at all. Perhaps it is only you moving from one still frame to the next. It is like flipping through a book of drawings. Each picture is static, but when you flip quickly, a story appears. If the whole book is already drawn, then the story does not really unfold in time, it simply waits there, ready for you to turn the pages. Could your life be like that book? Past, present, and future are already printed, and your awareness is only the hand turning each page. Strangely, if everything already exists, then is regret still necessary? A memory you thought was lost has never disappeared. It is still frozen on some page. A meeting you are waiting for is already present somewhere in the block of time, only not yet reached. The paradox is that what you call gone forever may only be kept forever. But then another worry rises. If everything is predetermined, then do you truly have freedom? Your choice to drink a cup of coffee this morning, your choice to call someone, were these already written in the script? Are you merely replaying an unchangeable play? That thought can be suffocating. But pause for a moment. Even if the script is written, the very feeling of being free is itself part of the script. And perhaps that feeling of freedom is what gives life its meaning. Think of the last time you sat in a movie theater. You knew the ending had been finished long ago, but you still felt suspense. You still worried for the character. You still cried at their losses and rejoiced at their reunion. You knew the film was fixed, yet the experience was real. Is life any different? Even if every frame has already been set in the block universe, your awareness still trembles, still loves, still suffers. And that is the truth that matters. Psychology shows another curious fact. When you recall the past, the brain does not simply replay it. It rebuilds it from fragments. Each time you remember, you rewrite it a little. The past in your mind is both fixed and shifting. It has been, but it is also always being made new. Another paradox. The past exists, yet it is never exactly what you believe it was. If you pay attention, you will see that the paradox of time always carries a fragile feeling. Time makes you older, distances loved ones, leaves memories trapped only in thought. But at the same time, it creates music, for without rhythm, without passing, every melody would freeze into a single note. Change itself makes life a song. The paradox is this: you suffer because of time, but only through time can you live a full, beautiful moment. So you may ask yourself, am I moving through time, or is time moving through me? Perhaps both are true, or perhaps neither. For the question is not meant to give you a final answer, but to open a quiet space inside, a silence where you stop trying to grasp the flow and simply listen to the ticking as you listen to your own heartbeat. Tonight, as you close your eyes, try relaxing into the thought that every moment already exists, like stars scattered across the sky. You do not need to hold them, nor fear losing them. You only need to move gently from star to star, like a traveler walking through the galaxy of your own life. And in that instant, the paradox is no longer a threat. It becomes a whisper. Time does not flow. It only unfolds, page by page, for you to read. Try another imagination, gentle but strong enough to stir your heartbeat. What if tomorrow morning you step outside and realize that everyone around you has no consciousness? They are only machines that move, talk, smile, but are empty inside. Your neighbor still greets you. Your colleague still types at the keyboard. The cafe is still filled with the noise of orders being called. Everything looks the same, except for one thing. Only you have real experience, while everyone else is simply performing. This is the paradox called solipsism. It asks directly at the core, how can you be sure that others have minds like yours? You may protest. Of course they do. I see them hurt. I see them laugh. I see them get angry. All of it is real. But take one step back. What you truly see are only expressions. Tears rolling down, lips curving into a smile, a voice trembling. Your brain automatically translates these signs into, that person is sad, or that person is happy. But what evidence proves that inside they are truly experiencing sadness or joy in the same way you do? A familiar example is the computer. Today, software can compose music, reply to messages, even comfort you with gentle words. It pretends to have emotions in ways that are very convincing, yet you know it is only an algorithm. Then a chilling question rises. If a machine can pretend so well that you cannot tell the difference from a human, what standard can you use to say it does not have consciousness? And if you cannot find any sure way to check whether another person has awareness, could it be that the entire outside world is only a stage of machines, acting skillfully? Think of a memory. One time you might have heard a doll that could cry, and it released a programmed wah sound. For a brief moment, you might have flinched, as though a life had just been harmed. Of course, you knew it was only wires and a small speaker, but that reaction revealed something deeper. Your brain is so used to assigning mind to anything that behaves like a person. Hearing a cry, you instantly attach it is in pain. That very mechanism is also the bridge that lets you believe others have inner lives like yours. Philosophy calls this the problem of other minds. You only have direct access to your own inner experience. Every other mind is a hypothesis, a powerful and useful hypothesis, but still only a hypothesis. Just like when people once saw the sun rise every morning and believed that the sun really circled the earth, a belief that felt reasonable for thousands of years, until it was overturned. You may feel unsettled. If others are only empty shells, then love, friendship, trust, everything that gives life meaning, would they still have any value? But pause and observe your own reaction. You shiver not because the thought is true, but because it touches the root. You are living upon the belief that you are not alone in this world, even if you cannot prove it. That belief is the seed that moves you to work, to call someone, to cook for someone, to smile at a familiar face. In other words, the impossibility of proving other minds is itself the foundation of human connection. So, where is the paradox? It is here. The less you can prove, the more you need to believe. And the more you need to believe, the more you hold tightly to the world around you as a real stage, where other actors are also truly living, loving, hurting, crying. The paradox is like a thin bamboo bridge. Reason tells you it might break at any moment, but stepping onto it is exactly what gives you the sense you are not falling into the abyss. Now imagine tonight. As you close your eyes in a quiet room, the thought returns. How can I be sure that tomorrow my loved ones will wake up with a soul and not simply continue a role like machines? The question has no final solution, but precisely because it has no answer, it opens a deeper curiosity, so that when you look into another's face, you do not only see eyes and smiles, but also an immeasurable mystery. Is there truly someone inside, or not? And you realize that this mystery is exactly what softens life from being cold. Picture a morning when you are sitting at your favorite cafe, the sound of spoons tapping against cups, quiet chatter from the next table, orders being called, the bell jingling as customers come and go. The scene is vivid and real. But if you pause and ask, am I sure that all these people have inner lives like mine? A strange sensation arises. Suddenly, the cafe feels like a stage, where actors repeat gestures and lines like characters in a video game. And you, only you, are the one truly awake, truly experiencing. This is not a far-fetched illusion. In fact, your own brain has done this unconsciously many times. Recall a moment when you were speaking with someone, but your mind was far away. You nodded, you smiled, but nothing was truly received inside. In that moment, you yourself were a machine that replies, not really present. So when you look at others, how can you be sure they are not also nodding and smiling inside a script? Philosophy calls this radical skepticism. If you cannot access another's mind, then all evidence of their feelings is only a hypothesis drawn from behavior. You see someone smile, and you infer they are happy. But sometimes that smile is only politeness, hiding sorrow. And in the extreme case, perhaps it is only an empty expression, like a moving mask. This question brings you into a blind spot of thought. If you try to find evidence that others truly have consciousness, you will quickly be stuck. The only evidence you ever have is your own experience. You know you feel pain when burned, joy when hearing music. But for another person, you only see behavior. The gap between outer expression and inner experience is a chasm that cannot be filled. Yet right here, the paradox reveals itself. If everything were only fake, why would you care this much? Why, when you see someone cry, does your heart ache, even though you cannot prove whether that tear carries a real inner life? Your reaction goes beyond reason. It comes from a deeper layer, where empathy does not need proof. You feel others as an obvious truth, even while logic whispers that nothing is certain. The paradox deepens when you notice that the very need to prove betrays you. The harder you search for reasons to believe, the more fragile it feels. But when you stop demanding, when you simply listen to laughter, when you sit next to someone in silence, their presence feels clearer than ever. It is like listening to music. You do not analyze each note to prove the song exists. You simply let it flow. And in that moment, truth is not in proof, but in experience. This is the climax. The paradox of other minds cannot be solved by logic. It can only be surpassed by living together. You do not know if others have consciousness, but you live as if they do. And that, as if, creates the human world. Language, love, community, art. This world does not stand on certainty. It stands on a belief that cannot be proven. So when you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself, if tomorrow I woke up and found that everyone else was only machines, would I live differently? Perhaps you will find that the answer is gentler than you imagined. Because whether they have true minds or not, the fact that you choose to believe and to act as if they do is what makes the world meaningful. The paradox here is this: what you cannot prove is exactly what you cannot live without. And when you see that, your heart softens. For even if the world is only a stage, in each small moment when you smile at someone, when you hear a greeting, when you reach out to hold another's hand, even a play is enough to show you that you are not alone. Tonight, before closing your eyes, try a small thought that could shake the very foundation of what you call reality. What if everything you are seeing, the warm light on the ceiling, the steady hum of the fan, the image of the phone lying face down on the table, is nothing more than a film projected straight into your brain? How do you know you are not simply watching a movie? The question may sound ridiculous, yet it slips a tiny pebble into your shoe. Every step after feels just a little different. Let your body rest still. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly. In that pause, an ancient intuition comes forward. All your life, you have never touched the world directly. Everything passes through the customs gate of the senses. Eyes only receive light, ears only receive vibration, skin only receives pressure and temperature. The tongue only receives taste, and the nose only receives smell. Your brain assembles those fragments into a picture. This is my room. This is the person I love. Think carefully. This picture has never been the thing itself. It is only a map. A very ordinary example. A dream. In a dream, you walk across a bridge. The wind is cold. Your hand grips the iron railing. Mist gathers into droplets. Everything is convincing enough that you never doubt it. Only when the alarm rings does the curtain fall. So, in the moment just before that sound, what was your reality? It was a picture painted by your brain. And upon waking, what is your reality again? Another picture painted by the same brain. Two pictures, two layers of conviction, the same mechanism. You may protest, but waking life is different from a dream. Put on a virtual reality headset. Within minutes, your body begins to believe in the virtual cliff edge before you. Your knees tremble as you step onto a plank suspended in the air. Then someone unexpectedly taps your shoulder. Your heart jumps. The brain chooses the fastest way to protect you. It believes what it sees is real as long as it is consistent enough. There are many stranger experiments. The rubber hand illusion. When you see a fake hand being stroked while your real hand is hidden and stroked in the same rhythm, only a few minutes later, your brain begins to adopt the fake hand. Or the phantom phone vibration. How many times have you been certain your phone just buzzed, yet the screen remained silent? The brain itself created the vibration out of expectation. If every experience is a product of the brain's interpretation, what guarantees that tonight, right now, you are not simply a brain in a vat, sustained in liquid and wired into a supercomputer, receiving streams of data identical to everyday life? You may argue, but I have memories. I remember my childhood. I remember the smell of sunlight on the schoolyard. The problem is that memory itself is just data that can be implanted and reconstructed. The movies you watch, the stories you hear, even the phenomenon of false memory reveal a chilling truth. What we call the past is nothing more than the present retelling itself in the service of meaning. The philosopher Descartes once suspected that there might be a malicious demon deceiving all his perceptions. He decided to retreat to one single point. I think, therefore I am. Yet in everyday life, you do not have time for such philosophy. You need to walk across the street to believe the crosswalk line is real, that the green light is truly green. For if you question reality every second, you will be paralyzed. Ironically, it is the very need for action that makes the brain close the book of doubts and sign the contract with sensation. From temporary assumptions, the brain manufactures the illusion of certainty just so you can move. Expand the thought one step further. In physics, particles only appear as something when they are observed. Before that, they remain a cloud of probabilities. In cognitive psychology, biases such as confirmation, selective attention, and framing constantly steer your perception to reduce inner conflict. When the foundation itself is assumption, any reality can be constructed by another set of rules. You may start to feel a little dizzy. If everything passes through a filter, if memory can be wrong, if senses provide only maps, then where is the final anchor of the real? Perhaps reality is nothing more than what is most useful for survival. If that is true, then the stone knife of a prehistoric hunter and your modern smartphone, though from different eras, serve the same instinct to choose the belief that helps life continue. In that way, truth may be optimized more for survival than for itself. In the darkness, the fan continues to turn. You hear its sound like the drip of passing time. A slow thought arises. Perhaps the question, is this real, does not need an answer right now. What matters, more subtle and more important, is how that question opens a small crack in the habit of your seeing. Through that crack, you slip in one fingertip and touch not the object but the very mechanism of perception itself, the projector that plays the film called My Life. We will go deeper. But tonight, it is enough to recognize one thing. The picture in your head has never been the landscape outside. It is the best story your brain can write in haste so that you may continue to live. And knowing this, there is no need to be afraid. You only need to breathe slowly, look gently, and whisper an old question with a new voice. If everything is only a projection, then what in me is looking at the projection? Whisper it slowly. There is a strange moment you may have experienced. Walking down the street, suddenly stopping, and feeling the world around you turn unfamiliar. Everything is the same familiar houses, passing people, the sound of car horns, yet they all suddenly feel as though you are standing outside of a dream. People call this phenomenon derealization. The brain suddenly allows you to see life itself as a stage and everything as a play. If that experience ever gave you chills, then it also opened a possibility. Perhaps the entire real world is nothing more than a thin skin, fragile as mist. To picture this more clearly, try a simple experiment. Place a pencil on the table. Look at it closely. What do you see? A long object? Colors? Reflected light? A shadow? All visual data. Now close your eyes and touch it. Smoothness, hardness, coldness, that is, tactile data. Open your eyes, and your brain combines those two streams into the statement, "This is a real pencil." But remember, you never touch the object directly. Skin only receives pressure. Nerves only transmit electric signals. Reality here is simply the consistency among several senses, which means the reality you trust is nothing more than a puzzle your brain pieces together. The brain is the storyteller behind the curtain. Another everyday example. When riding a train, looking out the window, you sometimes feel the train next to you is moving. Your heart stirs for a second. Then you realize it is your own train that is shifted. That fleeting moment shows how the brain always rushes to construct the most reasonable story, and often, that story is not objective truth. Even stranger, sometimes your eyes see one thing, but the brain edits it instantly to fit what should be there. Like the blind spot on the retina, your eyes see nothing there, but you never notice because the brain automatically paints in what is missing. From here, a more unsettling question arises. If the brain continuously invents details, ignores what it dislikes, and fills in the gaps, then how much of the self living in this world is truly touching reality, and how much is simply being lulled by imagination? And if the answer tilts toward imagination, are we any different from characters in an extended dream? Philosophers have long played this game with reason. Plato spoke of the cave, where people spent their entire lives watching shadows on the wall and believed that was reality. Hilary Putnam modernized it with the brain in a vat. Today, computer scientists like Nick Bostrom wager that we are almost certainly living in some form of simulation. These hypotheses are not meant to deliver absolute conclusions, but to open cracks in the solid wall that the mind constructs. Even a small crack is enough for the light of philosophy to shine in, shaking the once obvious concept of real and unreal. Let me tell you a story. A man dreamt he was a butterfly. When he woke, he wondered, was I a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming it was a man? This tale of Zhuangzi is far from old. It reminds you that the line between dream and waking, between man and butterfly, between real and illusion, is as thin as a breath of wind. And tonight, as you lie down and close your eyes, how can you be certain which is the wing of the butterfly and which is the skin of a man? The deeper you think, the clearer another paradox becomes. Whether the world is real or illusion, the brain must treat it as real. Because if it did not believe in some reality, life could not continue. It is as if the brain knows it is staging the show, yet still chooses to sit down in the audience and watch its own film, simply because that is the only way to survive. Reality may be a theater, but if the audience walks away, the stage itself has no reason to remain. So what is the climax of perception? It is when you accept that you cannot be certain. This is not a failure, but an open state, where every certainty dissolves and what remains is only presence, heartbeat, breath, the stream of thought. You may never touch ultimate reality, but you are living this experience, and that is the only reality you have the right to meet. And then, as the first chapter closes, the original question returns, this time deeper. If everything is just a film inside the brain, then what in you is sitting and watching? The answer does not appear immediately. But that is the beauty of paradox. It does not hand you a solution. It only turns the lock slightly, so that inside you, something begins to open on its own. Put yourself into a situation that sounds almost like a joke. You stand before a door. Behind that door is a strange machine, called the experience machine. Once you connect, it will place you into a perfect world. Every pleasure, every success, Every feeling of happiness you ever wished for will happen as if it were real. No pain, no failure, no rejection. You will live inside your own paradise of choice. But the question is, would you dare to step inside? At first, the answer seems too easy. Of course you would. Who would turn down a life overflowing with joy and delight? Yet, the paradox begins to appear when you pause for a moment and think more deeply. If every pleasure is nothing more than electronic signals sent directly into your brain, do they still hold meaning? If you hug someone you love, but know it is only an illusion created by the machine, would that embrace still warm your heart the way it does in the real world? The clearest example is video games. When you role-play inside a game, you can build a city, conquer lands, marry, even have children. While playing, you feel genuine excitement and joy. But when you step away from the screen, a small emptiness arrives. It was all only points, only data. That happiness never truly took root in this world. It passed by like a breeze. So the question arises, if you spent your entire life inside the experience machine, would it be any different from being trapped forever in a game, never touching the real? The philosopher Robert Nozick used this experiment to challenge our idea of happiness. He asked, if happiness is only a state of mind, then why would we not choose to spend our whole lives inside the experience machine? The reason so many hesitate or flatly refuse reveals the paradox itself. It seems we do not only want the feeling of happiness, but also the truth that those experiences are rooted in an objective world. You might recall a personal memory, the first time you completed something difficult on your own, perhaps graduating, perhaps cooking a meal from start to finish, or composing a piece of music. That joy is completely different from the joy of winning an easy round of a game. Why? Because in the first case, you know you truly struggled and overcame something real. That sense of realness, even if it is not more pleasant than pure pleasure, makes life feel more meaningful. The paradox becomes even sharper if you imagine this. Suppose you could plug into the machine for 24 hours to live one perfect day and then disconnect. That day would be filled with joy, your dream house, complete love, effortless success. But when you return, disappointment settles in. You know that nothing left a real trace in the world outside. And the question presses again. What matters more, the feeling of happiness, or the truth that happiness is tied to reality? The fascinating part is that in everyday life, we already brush against this paradox. When you hear a sad song and cry, you know no one has died, no tragedy has happened. Yet the emotion is strong. When you read a powerful novel, you bond with characters, your heart races, you worry for them, and still, you know they do not exist. You are moved, but deep down, you understand. Those feelings cannot replace the bond of a real human being. So, the experience machine is not only a door to unlimited happiness, it is also a mirror, reflecting a deeper human need. We long for meaning, not just pleasure. And the paradox is here. Sometimes we choose real suffering instead of false happiness. We choose a real love with tears over a sweet illusion that is empty. Tonight, as you think of this, you may ask yourself, if that machine stood right next to me, would I step inside? The question does not need an immediate answer. Because your hesitation, your pause between illusory happiness and truth with pain already shows that the human mind is far more complex than a machine chasing pleasure. Go deeper into the paradox of the experience machine. Suppose you could stay inside not just for one day, but for an entire lifetime. You would live in a world where every dream comes true. Perfect love, a brilliant career, endless fame, infinite joy. Everything you ever desired is in reach, like a dream that never ends. And yet, imagining that, why does part of you still hesitate? Perhaps the reason is this. We do not only crave feelings, we crave truth. If your love were only programmed, if the people you met were only generated images, If your success were only an illusion, would you be truly happy? Think again of playing a video game where you achieve a high score. In the moment, you are thrilled, your heart races, you feel successful. But when you turn it off, emptiness returns. Nothing real was created outside. That joy dissolved like smoke. Robert Nozick argued that most of us would reject spending life inside the experience machine because there are things more important than feelings. To live truly, to touch an objective world, and to create outcomes with your own hands. A moment of real suffering can sometimes mean more than 1,000 moments of false delight. The paradox is here. When you accept suffering, life becomes more valuable. Think of a simple example. When you exercise, sweat pours, muscles ache, your heart pounds. The sensations are unpleasant, even painful. But that very pain makes you feel stronger, makes you know your effort was not wasted. If the experience machine gave you only the feeling of success, without sweat or struggle, would that success still mean anything? Another paradox appears. We often think what we want is happiness, but deeper down, what we need is meaning. And meaning usually comes with challenge, with suffering, with imperfection. A smile after tears is not the same as a smile that was programmed. A victory after countless failures is not the same as a victory given from the start. So, standing before the experience machine, what would you choose? You may realize your hesitation is not because you fear false happiness, but because you quietly understand. A life filled only with pleasure, but without suffering, would feel hollow. It would be like a song made only of high notes without silence. At first it is pleasant, but over time it becomes exhausting, because there is no contrast, no depth. This paradox leads to a climax of awareness. Perhaps what makes life worth living is not comfort, but real contact with reality, even when it is rough, painful, or against your will. Imperfection is what makes every perfect moment precious. And when you see this, you may smile softly. Because perhaps, if someone placed the experience machine before you, the final answer would not be yes or no. It would be silence, a slow breath, and a question in return. If everything is only illusion, then what is it that I truly need happiness or meaning? That question does not need to be fully explained. It only needs to echo inside your mind, so that you yourself can reflect, search for your own answer, or perhaps never find one at all. And that is the true power of paradox. Imagine yourself sitting in front of a sealed box. You are told that inside there is a cat. But it is not simply alive or dead. Before you open the box, it exists in a strange state, both alive and dead at the same time. It sounds absurd, does it not? This is the famous paradox of quantum physics, Schrödinger's cat. The very thought is so unsettling that just mentioning it makes people shiver, because it challenges the foundation of objective reality that we have always trusted. In ordinary life, we are used to things having only one state at any given moment. This glass of water is either full or empty. This lamp is either on or off. But in the quantum world, the tiniest particles can exist in superposition, both this and that, until an act of observation takes place. It is the act of observing that forces the choice of a single state, which means you are not simply looking at reality, you are helping to create reality by looking at it. The cat experiment is only a metaphor to make it easier to grasp. Picture it this way. When you toss a coin, you know it will land either heads or tails. But in the microscopic world, a particle does not wait until it lands to decide. Before that, it exists in a probability cloud, both heads and tails. Only when you look does the outcome collapse. Reality, then, does not exist independently. It requires the participation of consciousness. Do you see how this paradox begins to touch daily life? If the world only becomes real when someone sees it, then when you turn your back, does the room still exist? When you fall asleep, does the world continue? Or does it wait until you open your eyes to resume? The question sounds silly, but it leads straight into the blind spot of thought. You have no way to be certain. In fact, you have already tasted hints of this. When you dream, space, people, and events all appear as though real, but they only exist when you look at them. Scene changes in dreams flow as smoothly as in a film edit. A moment ago, you were in a small room, and in the blink of an eye, you are standing on a beach. In that transition, did the scenery exist? Or did it appear only when your mind turned its gaze upon it? Philosophy calls this one of the central problems of epistemology. Does an objective reality exist independently of awareness, or does everything appear only when there is an observer? This question was raised as early as the 18th century by thinkers like Berkeley, who claimed that to be is to be perceived. Schrödinger's paradox transformed it from a philosophical idea into a genuine problem of physics. Think of an everyday example. At a party, dozens of people are talking, but you only clearly hear the person in front of you. The rest of the world fades into background blur. Then a glass shatters, and instantly the scene collapses. Into focus you turn your head, and a new slice of the world appears. It is as if reality is always hovering in a vague state, and only when you turn your attention does it choose a definite form. The paradox becomes even more unsettling when you reflect on the meaning of truth. If the cat can be both alive and dead until you open the box, then what is its real state? Could it be that reality is not what exists out there, but what appears within your awareness? If so, what you call objective truth is nothing more than a story woven from the times you observe. At that point, the world no longer feels solid. It is not a block of stone you stand upon. It is more like a stage, where scenery appears only where the spotlight shines. And again the question arises in your mind. If reality only forms when I look, then what remains when I close my eyes? Tonight, as you lie in bed, you can play with this thought. Imagine everything around you vanishes when you turn away. The dark room is gone. The wall is gone. The entire world disappears. Only when you open your eyes, look, touch, and listen does it come back. That feeling may send a shiver down your spine. Yet at the same time, it awakens you. Reality is uncertain, as fragile as mist, and that very fragility is what makes you marvel at every small moment. Now picture yourself standing before the box with Schrödinger's cat inside. Your hand rests on the lid, your heart pounds, your mind strains under the unavoidable question. At this moment, is the cat alive or dead? And the paradox whispers back a cold answer. Both. You want to resist that thought, because in everyday life nothing can both exist and not exist. But that impossibility is the very essence of the quantum paradox, and it pulls you into a deep spiral of awareness. Your daily reality is built on the foundation of clear dualities. Yes and no, light and dark, life and death. But the microscopic world plays by another rule. A particle can pass through this slit and that slit at the same time, until you look. Your gaze acts like a command. Choose. You must be one. And at the moment you look, the world settles into a definite form, which means you are not only a spectator, you are part of the play. If you stop here, your palms may already be sweating. But go a little further. If reality requires your gaze to exist, could it be that consciousness is at the center and the universe is only the stage revolving around it? The question sounds arrogant, but it also recalls deeply human moments. When you are sad, the world around you seems darker. When you are in love, the sky seems brighter. The wind feels softer. Perhaps reality has always shifted with your perception. Science at the microscopic scale is only saying it directly. You may recall a hazy experience. In a dream, something does not add up, and suddenly you realize you are dreaming. In that instant, the dream collapses. It no longer holds a consistent form. The dream exists only until you observe it with awareness. And the strange thought is this: is the world you live in any different? It looks solid only because you have not yet asked, "Is this real?" with complete seriousness. This paradox leads you into a dead end of logic. If the cat is both alive and dead until you open the box, then what decides which it will be? Are you truly the one who chooses? Or are you only a witness to a random outcome that nonetheless requires your presence to be recorded? In either case, you are no longer outside. You are already part of the equation. And with that, the very notion of objectivity trembles. This also gives freedom and responsibility a new color. If your observation affects reality, then every time you look, listen, touch, or think, you are co-creating with the universe. There is no longer a sharp line between me and the world out there. Every glance you cast is like planting a seed, and that seed blossoms into a form of reality. You may feel overwhelmed, but at the same time, it is liberating. You are no longer just passing through the world, you are helping to weave it. The climax of awareness comes when you whisper to yourself, "If reality only appears when I look, then could it be that my whole life I have only been staring into a mirror, reflecting my own consciousness?" The question is like an endless spiral. You observe, the world appears. The world appears, you observe again. And you never know which is the beginning, which is the ground. Tonight, when you close your eyes, try releasing a gentle thought. Perhaps everything is in superposition, both existing and not existing, and it appears only because I am here. You do not need to believe it fully, nor reject it. Just let the question drift through your mind like smoke. And as it fades, you may notice something strange. Whether reality is true or only reflection, the moment you are living still touches you, still makes you breathe more deeply, still slows your heartbeat. Schrödinger's paradox does not hand you a clear answer, but for that very reason, it leaves an open door. A door where you can stand at the threshold between is and is not, between real and illusion, and realize that perhaps the greatest value is not in choosing one side, but in knowing that both exist together in the same breath you have just taken. Imagine one day you walk into a math class and the teacher writes a very large number on the board. He asks, "Do you think a hotel with infinite rooms can still take in more guests?" Everyone laughs. That sounds impossible. If it is infinite, how could there be space for more? But then he continues, "This is Hilbert's hotel. Even with infinitely many guests already inside, there is always room for one more." The room falls silent. Because this is no longer a joke. It is a paradox that makes the mind explode. Infinity is both full and empty. Picture it. There is a hotel with endless rooms. Room number 1, room number 2, room number 3, stretching on forever. Every room is occupied. A new guest arrives at the door, and the manager smiles. "No problem. Let each guest move from room number N to room number N plus 1. The person in room 1 moves to room 2, the person in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. Now room 1 is free for the newcomer. The impossible suddenly becomes possible. And you begin to feel the strangeness of infinity. It does not behave like the familiar world you know. What if tomorrow another infinite bus of guests shows up? The manager still smiles. Simple. Move each current guest from room number N to room number 1. All the even-numbered rooms are filled, and all the odd-numbered rooms are empty enough for infinitely many new guests. Your reasoning wants to resist. How can something be full and still have infinite space? But this paradox forces you to see. The concepts you thought were certain, like full and no vacancy, collapse in the face of infinity. Everyday reality runs on the finite. If you have 10 chairs and add one more person, there is no seat. But with infinity, every familiar rule is overturned. So when you think of the universe with its possible infinite stars, infinite possibilities, could it be that you are living inside a cosmic Hilbert's hotel, where the impossible becomes possible? You already get glimpses of this in daily life. When reading a book, you open one chapter, then another. No matter how many you read, there is always another chapter, another idea. Knowledge is like an infinite sequence, never full, always with room for another piece. Or take love. You may think you have given your entire heart to someone, but then a child is born, or a new friend arrives, and you discover that your heart is not divided. It expands. The more you give, the more room there seems to be for love. So Hilbert's paradox is not just a mathematical trick. It reflects something deeper. Infinity is not a number, but a way of seeing the world. It teaches you that there are spaces that never close, experiences that never run out. Just when you think you have reached the end of understanding, a new horizon appears. But this paradox also plants a chill inside you. If infinity can hold infinity again, then does everything, the whole, or the ultimate, truly exist? Or are you forever walking down a hallway with no end, where every door you open only leads to more doors? The world, instead of being a completed whole, may be an endless chain that never closes. Tonight, when you lie down, imagine that your room is only one small chamber inside a vast Hilbert's hotel. There are infinitely many other rooms with infinitely many versions of you, stretching without limit. The thought may make you feel small, but it may also soothe you. If the universe is truly infinite, you can never be trapped in a dead end. There is always another door, always another space waiting for you to enter. And here the paradox does not demand a final answer. It only whispers in your ear. Full can also mean empty. The end can also mean forever. And when you listen, you may realize it is this infinity that makes each finite moment of your life so precious. Keep walking inside this imagined Hilbert's hotel. An endless hallway, doors numbered without end. 1, 2, 3, then 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, and beyond, past all counting. You open one door, and inside is a guest. The next door, another guest. Every room is taken. None are empty. Yet strangely, with just one new rule from the manager, suddenly thousands, millions, even infinitely many rooms are free. You feel dizzy. What you thought was full is no longer certain. In daily life, when you hear the word full, you picture an overflowing glass of water, a packed room, a suitcase stuffed tight. But in infinity, full does not mean nothing more can fit. This is the very point where the finite brain becomes confused. Your mind was built to count, to compare, to rank more and less. When it meets infinity, every standard collapses. Remember the last time you looked up at the night sky. Did you think you could count the stars? No. The more you look, the more appear. Even if you counted your entire life, you would only touch a fraction. Or think of numbers. Try to imagine the largest number. Whatever number you name, simply add one, and there is a larger one. There is never a last. And then the chilling thought comes. If there is no final number, could it be that the universe itself has no final edge? Hilbert's paradox brings you to a climax of awareness. Perhaps every boundary you thought existed, the edge of space, the limit of knowledge, the end of experience is only an illusion. Every time you say, "This is the end," the next door opens. Life is the same. How many times did you believe you could not love more, could not learn more, could not endure more? Yet at the crucial moment, your heart widened, your mind expanded, your strength stretched further. Like the infinite hotel, you discover that within you, there are always more empty rooms for what is new. And yet, this paradox also casts a shadow. If there is never an end, does any journey have meaning? If every knowledge is only a fragment of infinity, does your effort matter? That question feels like a dead end. But right there, you notice a softer truth. The value is not in reaching the end, but in walking the path. No one can travel through all the infinite hallways, but the few steps you take are enough to make them your living reality. Think of reading a thick book. You know you cannot remember every page, every word, but just a few ideas, a few sentences are enough to change you. Infinity does not require you to possess all. Infinity only asks that you touch a part, and even that part is priceless. Just as with love, you cannot embrace all humanity, but a single glance, a single embrace, can let you feel the infinity of human connection. The climax of Hilbert's paradox is this: infinity does not erase the value of the finite. It makes it shine brighter. Because you know you cannot have everything, each small moment becomes miraculous. Each second is a room you step into, and you do not need to own the entire hotel to feel rich. So tonight, when the darkness falls, try this image. Close your eyes and think. Each breath I take is a room inside this infinite hotel. I do not need to open them all. I only need to open the one I am in and live inside it. And that is enough for infinity to be real. And in that thought, you may feel your heart grow lighter. Infinity is no longer overwhelming, but a reminder that even the smallest moment can hold the entire universe. Imagine one morning you wake up, look in the mirror, and see a familiar face. You sigh with relief. Ah, that is me. But just as that thought passes, another cold flash cuts through. Why am I so sure that the person in the mirror and the real me are the same? The question sounds strange, but it opens a profound paradox. Does the self that you have believed in since childhood truly exist? Or is it only an illusion that consciousness continuously creates? We usually believe the self is a solid entity, stretching from childhood all the way to now. You remember that you once went to school, once fell down, once loved, once cried. But pause for a moment. The body you are carrying today has replaced nearly all of its cells compared to 10 years ago. Your memories can be distorted, and sometimes entire portions are imagined. Your personality is very different from when you were a child. So which you is the real one? The 10-year-old child? The adult standing here today? Or the person who will grow old 30 years from now? A clear example is the phenomenon of memory loss. There are people who, after an accident, completely forget their past. They still live, still breathe, still laugh, but they no longer recognize family or friends. So does their self still exist? If the self depends entirely on memory, then losing memory would mean the I has disappeared. But if not, then what is the I? A broken stream of consciousness, or just a temporary label? Philosophy calls this the paradox of the self. Some thinkers say the self is only a series of psychological states strung together, like beads on a necklace. But if that is the case, where is the string? What connects the beads? You might say there is a real person experiencing it all, but try to look for that one. In a moment of stillness, you may see there are only thoughts, sensations, memories appearing, but no one standing behind them. You have felt this in everyday life. When you are immersed in music, or focused on a game, or deeply engaged in work, the I disappears. You do not think, I am listening to music. You just listen. You do not think, I am drawing. You just draw. In that moment, the experiencer is gone. Only the experience remains. And when you suddenly remember, oh, I am doing this, then the I reappears. It comes and goes, not nearly as solid as you once thought. Another example is dreaming. In a dream, you may be another person, living another life. At that time, you are certain that is me. But when you wake up, you realize it was only a temporary role in a nightly play. So, if in a dream the self can change completely, why do you insist that the waking self is the real one? Both are created by consciousness, and both feel vivid and alive. This paradox is not only philosophical, it cuts right into daily life. When you say, I am sad, I am happy, I think, who is the I in those sentences? An unchanging soul? Or only a label attached to passing feelings and thoughts? If you remove that label, what is left? Perhaps only pure life, happening on its own, without needing an owner. This question shakes the foundations you are used to. If the self is only a story, then who is reading these words? If there is no person behind it, then where does the meaning of life lie? You may feel dizzy, but within that dizziness, a small opening of light appears. Perhaps you do not need a fixed I to live. Perhaps it is exactly the constant movement, the uncertainty, that makes you flexible, that allows life to open into countless possibilities. Tonight, as you lie down and gently close your eyes, try dropping this question in your mind. Who is the one lying down? You will notice, each time you look, the self seems to hide, like a faint shadow. And perhaps, in that very moment, you will feel a sense of relief. No one needs to stand behind the controls. Life still runs by itself. Breath still moves in and out. The heart still beats, and the universe still turns. Let us go deeper into the paradox of the self. Close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out. A thought arises. I am breathing. But if you listen more carefully, you will see breathing still happens, even without attaching the label I. Without a controller, the lungs still expand and contract, the heart still beats steadily, blood still flows in the veins. The self that you believe is the center turns out not to be necessary for life to continue. The paradox becomes clearer. If without the self, life still moves on, then the self is only an extra layer, an illusion added on top. Yet this illusion is so strong that we attach it to everything. I think, I feel sad, I want. But ask yourself, when a thought suddenly pops up in your head like a tune or an old line of dialogue, did you truly decide to create it? Or did it simply appear and then fade? If so, then where is the I? Eastern philosophy once said, the self is like a reflection in water. You see it, but when you reach out, there is nothing to hold. Buddhism even uses the image of a river to describe the self. The water flows without stopping. Each drop is different, yet we call the whole stream a river. Your self is like that too, a flow of memories, sensations, and habits, but with no unchanging core at its center. In life, you have also accidentally experienced moments when the self disappears. When you gaze at a blazing sunset, for a brief instant you forget who you are. There is only the sky filling your mind. When you are absorbed in painting or playing music, the self fades, leaving only creativity flowing. People call this the state of flow. It shows that the self is not fixed. It can fade away, vanish, and return again. And if something can vanish and return, is it truly the essence? Another example is when you look at old photos. You see your childhood face. You remember, that was me. Yet at the same time, you know, that body has completely changed. Those thoughts are gone. Those memories are no longer clear. So is it fair to say that child and I now are the same person? Or are they only two states of one continuous stream, but without a fixed entity in the middle? The climax comes when you try to find yourself. You turn inward, watching each thought, each feeling. A thought appears. This is me. But who is observing that thought? If you say, the observer is me, then look more closely. Could it be that the observer is only another thought? A subtler illusion? You keep searching, peeling the layers like an onion, until finally you realize there is no solid core. There is only emptiness, but that emptiness is full, because it allows everything to appear. This paradox can send a shiver down your spine. If there is no self, then who is living this life? Yet at the same time, it brings freedom. If the I is only a story, then you do not need to defend it. You do not need to fear it fading away. You only need to live, and life itself is already complete. Tonight, you may silently ask, who is the one closing these eyes? You may never find an answer. But in not finding, a new space opens, a quiet place where there is no self to worry about, no burden of protecting an image. Only life remains, breathing, pulsing, unfolding moment by moment. And perhaps that is the deepest kind of freedom. Imagine one morning you step outside and see two people arguing. One shouts loudly, "Only unlimited tolerance can bring a better world." The other shakes his head. "No. If you are infinitely tolerant, then the intolerant will exploit that to destroy your freedom." You stop, feeling a chill. Because this is no longer just an ordinary quarrel, but a doorway into a strange paradox, the paradox of tolerance. At first glance, unlimited tolerance seems like a perfect ideal. Everyone has the right to speak, everyone has the right to live their own way, everyone has a place. But imagine this. If a group spreads hatred, incites violence, and denies the right of others to live, would you allow them to continue freely? If you tolerate intolerance, sooner or later, that very tolerance will be strangled. And so the paradox appears. In order to protect tolerance, sometimes you must be intolerant of intolerance. You can see this in daily life. Think of a group conversation among friends. Everyone shares freely, except for one person who constantly criticizes, interrupts, and dismisses others. If the group remains tolerant and lets that person go on, eventually the whole conversation collapses. The common freedom is destroyed by one who abuses freedom. So where is the line? When does tolerance become indulgence of harm? The philosopher Karl Popper raised this paradox in the 20th century, when the world was scarred by wars and the rise of extremist regimes. He warned, if society allows extremists the right to deny and destroy freedom, then sooner or later, that society will lose its freedom. Tolerance, if without limits, destroys itself. This is a painful paradox, because it forces you to admit no ideal can stand firm without vigilance. In personal life, you have faced this too. When you are too tolerant with someone who constantly crosses boundaries, overshadows you, hurts you, you think you are being generous, but in fact, you are losing yourself. Such a relationship can drag on for years, until you finally realize, to protect peace, you must set limits. And in that moment you see clearly, sometimes saying no is the deepest form of love and freedom. The paradox of tolerance is not only found in society or politics, but also echoes inside your own mind. There is a voice that urges, you must be stronger, better, faster. If you are infinitely tolerant of that voice, it will suffocate you, making you a slave to perfectionism. To be truly tolerant with yourself, sometimes you must firmly silence that voice, refusing to let it rule you. The big question arises, where is the limit? How do you distinguish between tolerance and indulgence? There is no definite answer. Because the paradox itself exists to remind you that every noble value must be protected by boundaries that seem paradoxical. You want freedom? Then know when to set limits. You want love? Then know when to stop. You want tolerance? Then know when to be firm. Tonight, as you sink into the dark, you may ask yourself, am I being too tolerant of what hurts me? Am I letting tolerance turn into chains? That question is not meant to close your heart, but to show you a subtle truth. Tolerance is not about opening the door without conditions, but about opening it with clarity. And perhaps it is that clarity that turns tolerance into a treasure, instead of a blade that turns against you. Try sitting quietly and remembering a time when you were too tolerant. Maybe it was when you let a friend break promises again and again, yet you stayed silent. Maybe it was during a debate, when you let someone repeatedly dominate and dismiss your opinion. At first you thought, I am being generous, but later you felt something inside slowly erode. Your trust drained, your voice grew weaker, and the paradox of tolerance revealed itself. If you tolerate what tramples you, you will lose the very ability to be tolerant. In society, this paradox is even harsher. History has seen times when people allowed extremist ideologies to grow in the name of freedom of speech. But then, those ideologies grew strong, becoming the blade that severed the freedom of all. Karl Popper said it clearly. We cannot tolerate unlimitedly. because then tolerance will be destroyed by the intolerant. That statement is not only philosophy, but a lesson written in blood and tears. But the paradox here is not as simple as set limits, because if you are too rigid, you may slide to the other extreme, becoming the intolerant one. You build walls, forbid, reject all differences, and then you recreate exactly what you tried to resist. So how do you walk the thin line between tolerance and self-protection? In psychology, it is called the art of setting healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not to close the heart, but to keep it from being torn apart. When you say, "I do not accept the way you treat me," you are not rejecting the person, you are rejecting the harmful behavior. When society says, "We do not accept violence in the name of freedom," it is not rejecting diversity, but protecting the foundation for diversity to exist. A simple image. Think of a garden. If you are tolerant and let weeds spread, soon they will overtake and choke the flowers. To keep the garden beautiful, you must cut back, you must set limits. But if you go too far and cut everything, both flowers and weeds, the garden becomes barren. So tolerance is like tending a garden. It requires balance, requiring hands that are both gentle and firm. This paradox pushes you to a climax of awareness. Sometimes, exactly when you refuse, when you are firm, when you set boundaries, you are truly practicing love and tolerance. Because without boundaries, all good things will be smothered. And the moment you realize this, you see a painful yet shining truth. Tolerance is not unlimited opening, but keeping the door safe so that the house can endure. Tonight, before falling asleep, you might ask yourself, who am I being tolerant with? And is that tolerance nourishing me or destroying me? That question may leave you hesitating, because there is no clear answer. But that is the nature of paradox. It forces you to stay awake each moment, instead of hiding behind pleasant slogans. And perhaps the real answer does not lie at either extreme. Not unlimited tolerance, not total closure, but a subtle journey, opening when needed, closing when needed. A journey that only you, by deeply listening to yourself, can decide. And that is the most beautiful part of this paradox. It gives you no formula, only a mirror, so you can see yourself and learn to love and protect at the same time. Imagine you have a twin, identical to you down to every strand of hair, every fingerprint. The two of you were born at the same moment, sharing every memory of childhood. But one day, you decide to board a spaceship, traveling at a speed close to the speed of light, while your twin remains on Earth. For you, the journey may last only a few years, but when you return, you discover your twin has aged decades, while you are still young. You stand before the mirror, seeing two faces born from the same origin, yet separated by an entire lifetime. This is the twin paradox in Einstein's theory of relativity, a paradox that suddenly makes time feel strange, no longer fair for everyone. At first, you want to protest. That is impossible. Time must be fair. It flows the same for everyone. But modern physics says otherwise. Time is not an absolute stream. It stretches or shrinks depending on the speed at which you move and the gravity you experience. The one who moves faster, closer to the speed of light, will age more slowly. The twin paradox is not science fiction. It is the outcome of mathematics, and it has been confirmed through experiments. You can see this in more ordinary examples. On the GPS satellites orbiting Earth, their clocks must be adjusted constantly, because they run slower than the clocks on the ground, due to both speed and gravitational influence. Without correction, the navigation system would drift by several miles, or about several kilometers, in just a few days. This means that the very phone you hold in your hand each day is quietly compensating for the stretching of time. Imagine that one day you receive a question that at first sounds like a joke. How do you know you are not just a brain sitting in a jar, hooked up to a supercomputer, and everything you see, hear, touch, and even love is nothing but signals being pumped straight into you? You laugh, but after a few seconds a chill creeps in, because you realize that you cannot actually prove the opposite. This is the paradox of the brain in a vat, one of those philosophical thought experiments that shakes the very roots of what we call reality. In everyday life, you believe the world out there is solid and certain. You see green trees. You hear birds singing. You feel the cool wind brushing against your skin. But every one of these experiences passes through the brain, and the brain only knows electrical signals. If a machine were sophisticated enough, it could send your brain exactly those signals, and you would live inside the illusion of a world. So how do you know you are not already living inside a simulation? The closest example is a dream. When you dream, you fully believe it is real. You can laugh, cry, run, or be terrified. Every sense deceives you until you wake up. A dream may last just a few minutes, yet it can contain an entire lifetime. If a dream can convince you that completely, then how can you be sure that waking up is the final step? What if your current life is just a larger dream, waiting for another bell to ring you awake? Western philosophy has long wrestled with this question. Descartes once asked, "How do I know I am not being deceived by a cunning demon who manipulates all my senses?" The only answer he kept was, "I think, therefore I am." But even that, under the lens of the brain in a vat, becomes fragile. If every thought could be nothing more than a signal implanted into the brain, then who is the one truly thinking? In daily life, you can see reflections of this paradox on a smaller scale. When you wear a virtual reality headset, you step into a world that looks perfectly real. You glance down a cliff, and your heart leaps in fear. Even though your mind knows you are still standing in a safe room, your body trembles. The brain does not distinguish between illusion and reality. And if technology can do this within a few decades, then a superintelligence far in the future could surely make you believe that an entire lifetime is real. A cold question echoes. If the entire world is nothing but signals inside your brain, then what remains when those signals stop? You might feel as if you have reached a logical dead end. Every piece of evidence you have exists only inside your experience, so you can never step outside of experience to verify it. In other words, you cannot escape the vat to see if you are truly inside it. And here, the paradox reveals a bitter truth. Maybe we will never know for sure, but instead of despair, you can recognize another depth. Reality, whether true or false, is still touching you. When you laugh, the joy is real in your experience. When you love, that love still makes your heart beat faster. Even if it is only an electrical signal, its meaning inside you cannot be denied. The brain in a vat paradox is like a mirror. It does not show you the outside world, but shows you the limits of your own thinking. It confronts you with the question, do you need an absolutely objective world in order to live? Or is this experience, this very moment, already real enough for you? Tonight, as you close your eyes, you may whisper, whether this is real or a dream, I am still breathing. I am still alive. And perhaps in that very uncertainty, you discover another kind of certainty. That meaning does not depend on whether the world is real, but on the fact that you are here, now. Take a moment and look around your room. The table, the wall, the light, the sound, all familiar. But if someone told you everything you see is nothing but data fed into your brain, could you prove them wrong? You could knock your hand on the table, feel the solidity echo in your palm. Yet you remember, even that sensation is nothing but electrical signals running along nerves. The world you trust as most solid may be so fragile that it could exist only as lines of code. The brain in a vat paradox gives you no escape, because if you look for proof, every proof comes from the very experience you are doubting. You ask, is there truly a sun out there? Your eyes see the light, your skin feels the warmth, but those signals themselves may be simulated. Searching for proof of reality is like staring into a mirror, hoping to see your true face. You only find an endless reflection. But the paradox is not only here to bring despair, it opens up a deeper question. What counts as real? If you are dreaming, yet the joy, the sadness, the pain inside the dream still touches you, is that not real? Perhaps real is not an objective world outside, but the power that experience has inside you, whether it is signals or not. The joy of holding someone, or the sorrow of losing something, is still true in your mind. In psychology, there is talk of useful illusions. Some illusions help you survive and find meaning. The self is an illusion, but through it, you build relationships. Time may be an illusion, but through it, you learn to cherish the moment. So if the entire world is an illusion, what then? As long as the illusion is consistent enough for you to love, to learn, and to grow, then it has already fulfilled the role of reality. The peak of realization comes when you stop trying to escape the imaginary vat and instead ask a new question. If I really am inside the vat, how will I live so that this life is still meaningful? That question changes your perspective. Instead of struggling to prove or disprove, you return to the experience itself. The rhythm of breath, the sensation on your skin, the eyes of someone beside you. And you see that meaning does not need an objective foundation. It grows within you, like a flower blooming in empty space. The brain in a vat paradox is not created for you to solve, but to help you recognize the limits of knowledge. It is like walking down a corridor that ends at a foggy wall, where you must stop. But instead of despair, you may smile, because sometimes that stopping point opens a new kind of freedom. The freedom of not needing certainty, only presence. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, you may whisper a question that does not need an answer. If everything is only a great dream, how will I choose to live inside this dream? That question, like every paradox before, does not close but opens. It opens space for you to reflect, to define real, not through theories, but through how you live each moment. And now, after walking through so many paradoxes, from Schrödinger's cat, alive and dead at once, to Hilbert's hotel, already full yet still having room, from the twins living in different flows of time, to the self as fragile as a mirage, you may find yourself in a strange place. No certainty is left standing. Every foundation you thought was firm, time, reality, the self, freedom feels shaken. But paradoxes do not come to destroy you. They come to whisper. You do not need certainty in order to live. Because when you look closely, you realize, even if everything is just a dream, that dream is still breathing with you. Even if the self is nothing more than a story, that story is still being told by your heartbeat. Even if time is an illusion, each small moment is still shining like a lonely star in the endless sky. And it is precisely uncertainty that makes every moment precious. Tonight, when you place your hand on your chest and feel your steady heartbeat, know that you do not need to solve every paradox. You only need to let them open windows of light in your mind, so your gaze grows softer, wider, and more curious toward this world. Because sometimes, no answer is the most beautiful answer of all. And perhaps the greatest gift that paradoxes leave behind is not knowledge, but a state of stillness. In that stillness, you no longer need to decide what is real or what is illusion. You no longer need to win or lose arguments. You just sit there, breathe in, breathe out, and smile at the mystery that cannot be touched. Let the paradox end where it began, not with a conclusion, but with a question you may carry into your sleep tonight. If everything is only a game of the mind, then what inside me is still quietly watching, still present, no matter the illusion? That question will not force you to answer. It only needs to echo gently, like a distant bell in the night. And perhaps, in that silence, you will find a peace deeper than any explanation could give.